going to use whatever time I have. Um, so we'll see. Hopefully, we'll be able to get through it. I think the core we definitely will, and I
Okay,
hope beyond that as well.
go
So
ahead.
today's topic in halacha that we're going to be focusing on is the halacha of having lechem mishnah on Yom Tov. We all know that lechem mishnah on Shabbos is a chiyuv, it's a halacha that on Shabbos when we say hamoitzi on bread on challah, we take two loaves, and that's how we're supposed to do the bracha of hamoitzi on Shabbos. When the question is about Yom Tov, does the same apply to Yom Tov? Now, I think if I would ask everyone on the group, everyone would say yes. The truth is that the answer is yes. But today we're going to go into the background and also to figure out something very interesting. Is the Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos the same as the Lechem Mishnah on Yom Tov? What does it mean the same? What does it mean different? It's the same two pieces of bread, right? The same two loaves. But we're going to get into that today. So we begin with this week's parsha. This week's parsha, we learn about the man that came down, and we know that Moshe Rabbeinu tells Bnei Yisrael that they should gather it, and that on Shabbos they should not gather the man. And then he says, Sheishes Yamim Tilkutuhu. You should gather it for 6 days of Yom Hashvi, Shabbos Lo Yeh. On the seventh day is going to be Shabbos, and there will not be man. Now, just to be clear, just to give a background about where we're about to go with Rashi, and that is that the idea that the man would not fall on Shabbos was already evident and already clear to Bnei Yisrael. They saw it. It didn't fall on Shabbos. They already knew that. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them something in addition to that. So what does Rashi say? Uvayim Hashvi Shabbos, on the seventh day it's Shabbos. Shabbosu, it is Shabbos. Haman lo yeh boy, there will not be man. That's how obviously Rashi is explaining the pasuk, because with the punctuation you could read it wrong. Then Rashi concludes, and this is the main point we're going to be focusing on today. Rashi says, "V'leiba hakasuv ela l'rabis yom kippurim v'yomim tovim." The pasuk is coming to teach us that not only did the man not fall on Shabbos, the man also did not fall on Yom Kippur, and it also did not fall on Yom Tov, on the Yom Tovim. Now, okay, obviously it's very interesting because Yom Kippur was not yet a day, meaning it wasn't yet a day on the Jewish calendar. Shavuos wasn't yet a day. Either way, but in any case, the pasuk is teaching us that the days that would be Yomim Tovim were also days that the man would not come down. Now, this Rashi is based on a Mechilta, the Medrash Mechilta, and it's based on the opinion of Rabbi Elazar Hamudai. Now, let's read it inside, and we'll see how Rashi takes it. The Mechilta says, Sheishis Yamim Tilkutu, for 6 days you should gather the man. Rabbi Yeshua says, Lamanu, from here we learn She'ein Yered B'Shabbos, that it does not come down, that it did not come down on Shabbos. But Yom Tov Minayin, how do we know that the man did not fall on Yom Tov as well? Tamaloymar, that's why it continues and says, Shabbos Lo Yeh Boy. You see, it says for 6 days there will be man. Obviously, that means that not Shabbos. So the pasuk did not have to conclude and say, Shabbos Lo Yeh Boy. The fact that it spells it out is coming to teach us that Yom Tov we do not say on Yom Tov there was not man as well. Rabbi Elazar Mudai adds to that. He says, Lamanu she'ena yered b'Shabbos. From Sheishis Yom Tilkutu, we know that it didn't fall on Shabbos because it says only 6 days. But Yom Tov minayin, how do we know that on Yom Tov it didn't fall? Tamaloymar lo yeh boy. The pasuk says there will not be. Yom Kippurim minayin, how do we know that not only Shabbos, not only Yom Tov, but also Yom Kippur, there was no man. Tamaloymar Shabbos lo yeh boy. So basically, he's learning out the word Sheishis Yamim Tilkutu, Lo Yeh Boy, and Shabbos Lo Yeh Boy are 3 different limudim, 3 different sources from where we learn 3 different dates: Shabbos, Yom Tov, and Yom Kippur. So Rashi is getting his teaching that he says that this pasuk is teaching us about Yom Kippur and Yom Tov from this Medrash Mechilta. However, let's point out that Rashi, while seemingly saying the same thing, says it very differently. There are multiple differences between the way the Mechilta writes it and the way Rashi writes it. Number one, I'm going to bring 3 differences. Number one, maybe the first one that's obvious, is that Rabbi Elazar Hamudai learns each date separately. Shabbos you learn from one place, Yom Tov you learn from another place, and Yom Kippur you learn from another place. When I say another place, I mean another word in the pasuk. Whereas Rashi makes it into one inclusive limud, one inclusive source. That he says that it adds Yom Kippur and Yom Tov together. The second difference is that the Mechilta adds Yom Tov before Yom Kippur, whereas Rashi writes Yom Kippur before Yom Tov. Right? There's a difference there. The third difference is that Rashi doesn't say that it's additional words that teach us additional things. He says the whole pasuk is extra. V'loi ba hakasav. The pasuk does not come. This verse does not only comes to include Yom Kippur and Yom Tov. Whereas obviously the Mechilta doesn't do that way. The Mechilta learns it from different words, not from the entire pasuk. So there are differences from the way the Medrash writes it and the way Rashi writes it. But what do we see from here? We see that Rashi has a certain way of learning this idea that the man did not fall down on Yom Kippur and on Yom Tov. And by teaching it to us in this way, he conveys the message. What am I referring to? You see, there are two ways of explaining this idea. This idea that the man did not come down on Yom Kippur and it did not come down on Yom Tov. Either you say, just as Shabbos is a special day, just as Shabbos is a Yom Menucha, just as Shabbos is considered a Moyed, it's considered a special day in the Torah, so too the other special days are also significant, and Hashem did not want the man to come down on those days as well. That's one way of understanding it. And by the way, that might be the obvious way, the more simple way. But there is another way of learning it. The man did not come down on Shabbos. It also didn't come down on Yom Kippur and Yom Tov, but you know why? Because they have a little bit of Shabbos in them. Not because they too are special days, just like Shabbos is a special day. But the reason why the man did not come down on Yom Kippur and on Yom Tov is because those days have elements of Shabbos to them as well. And that is what Rashi is doing here. Rashi wants us to know that the pasuk that says of Vayom HaShvi Shabbos, the seventh day is Shabbos, those words are including additional days on our calendar that have elements of Shabbos as well. Not only the obvious Shabbos, the seventh day of every week, but also the other days on the calendar which have in them sort of the contents of Shabbos. So while the Medrash learns every limud differently, Shabbos is a special day. The pasuk adds more words. Yom Tov is a special day. The pasuk adds another word. Yom Kippur is a special day. Well, Rashi doesn't do that. Rashi includes it all together. He wants you to know that for the very same reason why it didn't come down on Shabbos is the same reason, the same teichen, the same content as the reason why it didn't come down in Yom Kippur and it didn't come down in Yom Tov. Now, so that's what we have from the way, sort of the Rashi way of learning it. And this also would explain why Rashi changes the order. Because it's more obvious that Yom Kippur is like Shabbos than Yom Tov being like Shabbos, right? In fact, Yom Kippur in the Torah is called Shabbos Shabbosim, the Shabbos of all Shabbosim. So the idea that if you want to point out that not only the seventh day of the week, but every day which has in it an element of Shabbos is included in the idea of the man not falling, it's more obvious to include Yom Kippur, and then you could also include Yom Tov. Okay, so let me actually do the contrast. In the Medrash, where it's not about having Shabbos in you, but rather it's about being a special day, there's Shabbos, category B is Yom Tov, category C is Yom Kippur. Whereas Rashi wants us to include them all because they are all really elements of Shabbos. They all have elements of Shabbos in them, and therefore, which one is the more obvious one to include together with Shabbos? It's Yom Kippur and then Yom Tov, because Yom Kippur is called Shabbos Shabbosim. Now, this idea would explain something else about Rashi's opinion here. With a little bit of background, the Gemara in Eruvin, actually, the Tosfos in the Gemara of Eruvin says like this. The Tosfos over there is discussing if the man came down on Yom Tif or not. You see, we just learned it from a Medrash and from Rashi that obviously did not fall down on Yom Tif and Yom Kippur. But in Tosfos, on the Gemara in Eruvin, he actually says that there are opposing midrashim. There's a machlokes about if the man came down on Yom Tif or not. He says either we say Amar b'medrash to darshin shlo yarad manli so b'shabbos v'yom tovim. Either from the medrash that we just learned, the Mechilta teaches us that it did not come down on Shabbos and Yom Tif. But there is another medrash which implies that only on Shabbos did the man not come down, but on Yom Tif and on Yom Kippur it did. What's that other medrash? So Tosfos continues, says V'yesh medrashim chalukim. There are medrashim that argue that Darshinan they learned from the words Vayevarech Vayikadesh. This is talking about in Parshas Bereshis when speaking about creation and speaking about the day of Shabbos. So it says Vayevarech Lekimas Yom Hashvi Vayikadesh Oisei, that Hashem blessed the day of Shabbos and He sanctified it. So the medrash says, what does it mean that Hashem blessed the day of Shabbos? Birchei b'man v'kitchei b'man. Hashem blessed it with man by having a double portion the day before. The kitchei b'man, He sanctified it with man that it would not fall on that day. So this medrash tells us, Tosfos, implies that only Shabbos was unique to have this bracha and this vayikadesh, this kiddush, this sanctification of the man not falling. And then he continues, Uve atikidashta, and akidashta we say, Uve rachtim mikol hayom v'kidashim kol hazmanim, mashma, the yarad man b'yom. From the other midrashim, says Tosfos, it implies that only Shabbos has this unique quality that the man did not come down. Okay, so that you hear Tosfos brings two midrashim. The medrash that we just brought, that Rashi brings as well, which is that the man did not come down on Yom Tov. But then there's a medrash on the pasuk with regards to Shabbos in Parshas Bereshis that says that Shabbos has a special blessing. What is the special blessing of Shabbos? That the man did not come down on that day, meaning only Shabbos and not Yom Tov and Yom Kippur. Yom Tov and Yom Kippur, the man did come down. You want to hear a problem? The problem is Rashi in our parsha brings the idea that the man did not come down on Yom Tov, did not come down on Yom Kippur. But he also brings in Parshas Bereshis the idea that Shabbos is unique. Birchei b'man v'kitchei b'man. He brings you see, what Tosfos considers two opposing midrashim, Rashi brings both. In Parshas Bereshis, he brings the one that Shabbos is unique, that it's the only day that the man did not come down. And in this week's parsha, he brings that, no, also Yom Kippur and also Yom Tov, the man did not come down. You see, let's see Rashi in Parshas Bereshis says, Vayevarech ve'ikadesh birchei b'man, v'kitchei b'man. And he concludes, V'mikra kosav al shema asid. The pasuk is referring to a blessing that's going to be in the future. 2,448, 2,248 years later, right? When the Yidden left Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, and the man came down. Now, so what do you see? You see, it seems like if Tosfos says they're opposing midrashim, and Rashi brings both. But based on what we learned before, that Rashi is telling us that the reason why it didn't come down on Yom Kippur and the reason why it didn't come down on Yom Tov is not because of the individual quality of Yom Kippur and Yom Tov, but rather because they too are like Shabbos, because they too have Shabbos in them. So now there's no contradiction. You could hold that Shabbos is unique, that it's the only day that man did not come down. And at the same time, you could hold that Yom Kippur and Yom Tov, man did not come down. How could that be? Because the reason why man did not come down in Yom Kippur and Yom Tov, not because of their independent quality, but rather because of the Shabbos element that they have within them. This is how we learn Rashi. Everything sits well. So you have, again, let's just summarize what we're holding. You have the Mechilta, which takes the approach that says, no, it's not that these three categories are the same. They're actually three different. There's Shabbos category A, Yom Tov category B, and Kippur category C. And by the pasuk adding additional words, it teaches us each one at a time. First Shabbos, which is the obvious one. then telling us the man did not come down in Yom Tov, and then adding that the man did not come down in Yom Kippur. Rashi makes it into all one, makes them all into one, and he says the man did not come down on these days not because the individual qualities of these three, but rather because they're all under the same category of Shabbos. And we see this clear both from this week's parsha and even more when we bring it together with the Rashi and Parshas Bereshis. What's the nafkamina? What's the difference in halacha? Okay, is there any difference between saying that it's because of their independent quality or because of their Shabbos quality that they have in them? It's nice, it's beautiful. It explains Rashi. It's a little bit lumdish, like it's yeshivish to a sense. But what's the bottom line? What's the difference? If you say that it's because of the Shabbos in these days or because of the independent quality of these days, that's what I would like to cover today. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm aware, don't worry, we have basically 17 minutes left and we'll try to keep to the time. But in the next 17 minutes, we're going to try to understand the halachic ramifications of the difference between Rashi and the Mechilta. But before we get to that, we're going to have to spend a few minutes. We're going to leave Yom Tov for now, put it aside, leave Yom Tov, leave Yom Kippur, and let's focus on Shabbos, Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos. Let's see, it's in the idea of Lechem Mishnah in general, actually. The Rambam, he mentions the idea of Lechem Mishnah twice. He brings it in Hilchas Brachas, and he brings it in Hilchas Shabbos. When it comes to Hilchas Brachas, the Rambam is describing how to say Amoitzi, right? Amoitzi, it sounds like a simple bracha, but obviously there's a lot of dinim. That if you have a kikir shalom, a whole loaf, and you have a prusa, a slice, you have to be beitzei on the whole. And mitzvah, it's a mitzvah to specifically be beitzei on a whole. Even in the middle of the week. In the middle of the week, if you're saying hamoitzi, I know now we buy bread from the store, usually they're sliced. So it's a little, I don't know, I guess, I don't know, it's a question for a Rav. But in any case, the point is that if you have a choice, you should make the bracha of hamoitzi on a kikir shalom, a shleima, call it shleima, right? A kikir shalom. That's what he says in Hilchas Brachas. And let's see, mitzvah min hamufcher livtzoya kikar shleima. It's a mitzvah that when a person says amoitzi, they should do it on a full loaf of bread. Im hoysa sham shleima shel sa'orim uprusa shel chitim. If there's a problem because you have a whole loaf of barley, of bread that's made of barley, but a slice that's made of wheat, and wheat is better than barley. Hashgacha pratis. We're learning this on Tu B'Shvat. Eretz chita sa'ira, very appropriate. So maniach shleima b'secha prusa. So you put them together, you combine them u'beitzei mishteim k'dei sheyivtze mechitim u'mishleima, because you're always trying to get the best when saying the bracha of Amoitzi. In other words, you're looking for the best way of praising Hashem. You want to put that in very simple terms. And then he continues. He says, "B'Shabbos u'v'yamim tovim, on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, chayiv livtzoya al shtei kikaris." On Shabbos and Yom Tov, not only one loaf, but two loaves. Noito shteim b'yada, you take both in your hand when you say the bracha. U'veitzei achas mehem, but you only have to open one of them. You only have to eat from one of them. That's the Rambam in Hilchas Brachas. It comes Hilchas Shabbos, and now he's speaking about what are you supposed to do in your Shabbos meal. And the Rambam says like this: Chayiv adam lechel shalosh sudas b'Shabbos. A person is obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbos. Achas arvis, v'achas shachris, v'achas mincha, the night, the day, and the afternoon. You should make sure you have these 3 meals. Even a poor person who's getting food, getting money from tzedakah, also should have these 3 meals. If it makes you sick, if for whatever reason it's difficult for you to eat the 3rd meal, then you're allowed to not have that 3rd meal. And then he says as follows: each one of these 3 meals has to have wine, even shal sudas, even the 3rd meal, suda shlishis. And then he says, and you have to make the bracha of Amoitzi on 2 loaves of bread, and also on Yom Tov. The Rambam brings it in 2 different places. it looks like he's repeating himself. But if we notice, if we go deeper into the words of the Rambam, to the precise language of the Rambam, we see that the Rambam is actually saying two different things. In the case of the Hilchos Brachos, he's saying one thing. In the case of Hilchos Shabbos, he's saying something else. Let me give some background, and then we'll see it in his words, and I think it's very clear. Sometimes you have to, as they say, shtuparan, you have to fit it into the words. In this case, you're going to see how the Rambam in two different places is saying two different elements of this halacha. You see, the idea of making lechem mishnah on Shabbos, there are two ways of understanding it. What are the two ways? What are the two ways of understanding it? So generally speaking, either it's a din in Hamoitzi or it's a din in Shabbos. What does it mean, a din in Hamoitzi? A din in Hamoitzi means like this. Just like during the week, you're supposed to look for the best. And what's the best what's the best? The best is a full loaf of bread. On Shabbos, sort of the bar is higher. Raised the bar. And now the best on Shabbos is 2 loaves of bread. So in other words, in order for you to do your Hamoitzi properly, on Shabbos you need more. Shabbos being a special day, a day of oinig, a day of pleasure. So then you don't just praise Hashem with 1 loaf, you need 2. So the fact that you need 2 is a din in the Hamoitzi. Or maybe it's not a din in the Hamoitzi, it's a din in Shabbos. Shabbos is special, and the day of Shabbos demands that you should have 2 loaves of bread. So you hear what I'm saying? These are 2 ways of seeing it. Either in order for your Hamoitzi to be done properly, you need 2 loaves, or in order for your Shabbos to be done properly, you need 2 loaves. What's the difference? I'm not. You might say I'm just splitting hairs. I'm not splitting hairs. The first obvious difference is, when do you need these 2 loaves of bread? Do you need it just to say Hamoitzi, or do you need it throughout the meal? In other words, you say Hamoitzi on 2 loaves of bread. Are you supposed to keep the 2 loaves on the table or not? I'll tell you, sometimes in my house I don't. For whatever reason, I don't know. This is before I calculated this halacha, factored in this halacha. But in any case, is the mitzvah just to eat from 2 loaves of bread, or just to make the bracha on 2 loaves of bread? Seemingly, the mitzvah mainly is to make the bracha of Hamoitzi on 2 loaves of bread. Once you made the bracha of Hamoitzi on 2 loaves of bread, you could put the other one in the freezer for whatever you want. You don't have to keep it out. You don't have to keep it on the table. And you definitely don't have to eat from it. Because it's a din, it's a halacha in the Hamoitzi that you need 2 loaves. However, if you say that no, it's not a din in the Hamoitzi, it's a din in Shabbos. Shabbos is special and demands 2 loaves of bread to be on the Shabbos meal. Oh, now it's different. Now it's not good enough just to make the bracha with it and then you put it back in the freezer. It should be on the table. And like some poskim, some Rishonim write this, that you should actually try to eat from both loaves of bread on Shabbos. You say lechem mishnah, right? You have 2 loaves. You should try to eat from both. It's a different way of, not only a different way of approaching the same thing, it has different halachas. Is it a din in the Hamoitzi, or is it a din in the Shabbos? So let's see what the Rambam does here. He brings this idea twice because he wants us to know that they're both true. It's a din in the Hamoitzi of Shabbos, and it's a din in the Suda of Shabbos. You see, when he speaks about the Hamoitzi, he says, you hold both and you eat one. You eat one because it's only about the bracha of Hamoitzi. When it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, he doesn't say you eat one. He says you should be boitzeya on 2, almost implying, he doesn't write this, that you have to actually eat from both. But he's saying, he doesn't go into the fact that you eat one and not the other, because that's not the point here. The point is that a Su'udas Shabbos needs 2 loaves of bread. You should keep it on the table for the whole meal. And yeah, mitzvah min hamufcher, maybe the best way to do it is also to eat from the second one. So in the laws of brachas, he's covering for brachas. And in the laws of Shabbos, he's covering for Shabbos. When in the laws of brachas and the halachas of brachas, he's speaking about the how to say Hamoitzi properly on Shabbos. And in the laws of Shabbos, he's telling you how to have a proper Shabbos meal. They meet, of course they meet. You're supposed to have lechem mishnah, but there's two layers in this lechem mishnah. the bracha of Hamaitzi and the Su'ud of Shabbos. Now, there is a second nafkamina. What's this? Another nafkamina, and this will go the opposite. So as of now, what we're holding now is that by saying that it's a law in Shabbos, it's a din in Shabbos to have, in this meal of Shabbos, to have 2 loaves, it's a little bit stricter. It's more chumradik. Why? Because it's not good enough just to have it at the first moment when you say the bracha, but for the whole meal you should have it. Almost like saying that it's part of the bracha of Moitzi is the more lenient approach. But now I want to bring a nafkamina, in other words, a difference in halacha where it would go the opposite. What did the Rambam say? How many meals you have on Shabbos? 3 meals. Shalosh sudas. Say a person has a 4th meal on Shabbos. A 4th meal on Shabbos. Do you need lechem mishnah in your 4th meal? So it depends. If it's the reason why you have lechem mishnah is because Shabbos demands lechem mishnah, then no. Shabbos demands lechem mishnah only for 3 meals. Because Shabbos itself only demands 3 meals. But if you say it's a din in the betzia, it's a din in the hamaitzi, then in this 4th meal that you're making, yes, it's an optional, of course, it's your own meal. But in order to make hamaitzi properly, you're going to need 2 loaves. So it goes both ways, you see? If you say that it's a din in Shabbos, then you need them on the table the whole time, and maybe you should eat from both loaves, but only during these 3 meals, not the 4th meal. The 4th meal is not a Shabbos meal, meaning it's not a meal that's obligated, from Shabbos. It's your own meal. Okay, so then you don't need it. But if you say it's a din in the hamaitzi, so it's true you only need it for the beginning of the meal, but you need it for the beginning of every single meal. Because if you want to do hamaitzi properly on Shabbos, even in your additional 4th meal, then you're going to need to have lechem mishnah. Okay, so you see that it goes both ways. Now that we have it with regards to Shabbos, let's see if the same thing would apply also to Yom Tov. Now, interesting to point out that just as the Rambam has the laws of brachas and the laws of Shabbos, so too the source of the idea that lechem mishnah is on Shabbos and Yom Tov is also in Maseches Shabbos and Maseches Brachas. In the Gemara, Maseches Shabbos and Maseches Brachas. Now, I'm trying to make sure we can get everything in. And okay, so you have both a din in Shabbos of why you need lechem mishnah, and a din in Yom. Sorry, it's in Shabbos why you need lechem mishnah, and also a din in Hamaitzi why you need lechem mishnah. The question is if the same would apply to Yom Tov. And here's where we go back to our original difference between Rashi and the Mechilta. If you go according to the Mechilta that says Shabbos is one thing, one category, Yom Tov is another category, Yom Kippur is another category, so then, yes, certain things will apply from Shabbos to Yom Tov, such as you have to do lechem mishnah just like you do it on Shabbos, you have to do it on Yom Tov. But that will only be the element of bitzia, the element of making the bracha of hamaitzi. But the significance that Shabbos has would not transfer to Yom Tov and to Yom Kippur. Okay, Yom Kippur is a different, because obviously there's no lechem mishnah on Yom Kippur. You don't eat on Yom Kippur. But on Yom Tov, when you do lechem mishnah on Yom Tov, does it have the same status as Shabbos or not? According to the Mechilta, no. Even though Shabbos has a dual purpose in the lechem mishnah. What's the dual purpose? Number one, because of the bracha hamaitzi to be done properly, and number two, for the Shabbos meal to be done properly. So now that we know that the man didn't come down in Yom Tov as well, so from there we learn that also Yom Tov you need lechem mishnah, but not that it's coming from the day itself. It's coming from how to do a proper bracha of hamaitzi, that it needs lechem mishnah. But Rashi wants us to know, no. The same reason and the same idea of why the man did not come down on Shabbos is the very same reason of why the man did not come down on Yom Tov. And therefore, whatever applies to Shabbos Lechem Mishnah applies to Yom Tov Lechem Mishnah as well. And therefore, basically, it's not only to be doing it the bracha properly, but it should be there for the whole meal on Yom Tov as well. And just whatever the same status sort of that Lechem Mishnah has on Shabbos also applies to Yom Tov, because the fact that the mun did not come down on that day is also because of the Shabbos element which is within Yom Tov itself. I'm sorry, I realized that at the end I wanted to get into the Gemaras and it got a little difficult, but let me make a summary in a way that we could all hopefully understand the core and the important parts of today's shir. We started off with Rashi in this week's parsha that tells us that the man didn't come down on Shabbos, but also Yom Tov and Yom Kippur. We went to the source from where Rashi gets it from the Medrash Mechilta, and we noticed how Rashi brings the same idea but changes it in multiple ways. And we realized that what Rashi is doing is Rashi wants us to understand Yom Kippur and Yom Tov as an extension of Shabbos, not just as their own independent greatness. That the reason why the man did not fall down on those days is because of the Shabbos which is within them. And that's why he puts Yom Kippur first, because Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabbosan. Now, we asked, okay, so what's it? Before we asked, we also pointed out that if you learn it this way, it would also explain how Rashi is able to bring in Parshas Bereshis that the Shabbos, and only Shabbos, is unique, that the man did not come down. And in this week's Parsha, he says that also Yom Kippur and Yom Tov, because he holds that the reason why he didn't come down on Yom Kippur and Yom Tov is because they had Shabbos within them. We asked, okay, what's the difference in halacha? And we realized that there could be a major difference in halacha. By first understanding what is the idea of Lechem Mishnah. Is Lechem Mishnah a matter of Hamoitzi, or is it a matter of Shabbos? We see that the Rambam holds both a matter of Hamoitzi and also a matter of Shabbos. We said, what's the difference if you say it's a matter of Hamoitzi, a matter of Shabbos? There's two nafkaminas, two differences. Number one, is it important to have it throughout the meal or only at the first moment when you say Hamoitzi? And number two, if you have an additional meal, do you have to have Lechem Mishnah there as well? So based on all that, the question would now become, do we transfer this approach to Lechem Mishnah to Yom Tov as well? And the answer to that will be, depends. Depends on how we view Yom Tov in the first place. Do we view the idea of Lechem Mishnah and Yom Tov as an extension of Shabbos or as its own greatness? If it's its own greatness, then no. This dual value of Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos does not apply to Yom Tov, because Yom Tov has its own thing. And the only reason why on Yom Tov we have Lechem Mishnah is in order to do the mitzvah and the bracha of Hamoitzi properly. But Rashi wants us to know that no. This very same idea of Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos is the very same idea of Lechem Mishnah on Yom Tov, and it's also for its own greatness. In other words, for the day itself, the day of Yom Tov itself, just like the day of Shabbos, because Yom Tov has in it an element of Shabbos, and therefore, practically speaking, it's not only for the first moment when you say Hamoitzi on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, but also throughout the meal. And mitzvah min hamufchar is to eat from the 2 loaves of bread, not only from one. Everybody, I hope that the time constraint didn't limit us in our learning, and I hope we're able to appreciate this halacha. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining together today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.